What's up, everybody? All right, so of course, everybody is talking about what else? The Nazi rally that took place out in Charlottesville, North Carolina. And of course, I'm here to give you my analysis on what I have observed and what I think about these events. And of course, if you know me, you know I'm always looking at the angle that I don't hear anybody else expressing. So the first thing I want to get to right away, right off the bat, first of all, I'm not surprised to see this happening. But let's look at what this really represents, because I want you to see how everybody is adopting the phrase white supremacy and white supremacist. These are phrases that we have been using. When I say we, those of us who have followed the work and believe and support the work of the late great Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, along with the great Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and Amos Wilson and some of those others. We have been using this language for a pretty long time. And when we have used the word or the phrase white supremacy or white supremacist, there have been those who have challenged the use of that word because it was too harsh, it was inaccurate, or it wasn't an accurate depiction of what was really happening in terms of the white power structure in the country. Now, the reality is this: everybody is using that word right now, but I want you to understand that that word is being connected with white terrorism. That word is being connected with white extremism. That is not necessarily what white supremacy is. White supremacy can encompass that, but that's not the definition of what white supremacy is. Now, the danger in that is this: America gets to cover up its racist sensibilities in the most benign sense by causing all the attention to be linked towards extremism. So in the absence of extremism, you don't think it's white supremacy. That's what you got to really see. Nobody's talking about that. They are normalizing the word now in such a way that when someone says white supremacy or white supremacist, you're going to be looking for an extremist. You're going to be looking for a KKK regalia, dressed individual. But the reality is it could be the person sitting next to you who smiles at you every day, who shakes your hand, says nice things to you, and all of that. And the reality is white supremacy plays itself out in so many ways. And it's not just in burning crosses. And I've been saying this for a long time. It's not about burning crosses on lawns, as the Klan like to call it, lighting crosses. So that's the first thing I want you to really take notice of, is how that word is being normalized, but it's being attached to terrorism and extremism, which is really a totally different level of white supremacy. And it should be treated as such. The next thing is, notice how the key buzzwords for condemning these actions sound something like "there's no place for this in America," and "we strongly condemn white supremacy." But their condemnation of it is still not attached to any penalties for it. Nobody is saying, my thing is, where are all the law and order people at now? Because as long as Black Lives Matter was marching, then you had politicians out yelling about law and order. Now that the white terrorists are out marching in the streets, killing people, and all sorts of things. Nobody is talking about making these people pay. Nobody's talking about hunting them down and exacting penalties and consequences on them. That's another trick. So, of course, you're going to say on camera and publicly that you condemn it, and you condemn it in the strongest, with the strongest words and in the strongest sense, and it has no place here in America. But what are you going to do about it? I don't hear any solutions from people who hold the most powerful positions in government. They're not saying anything about what they're going to do about it. So that tells me that that's a dog and pony show. It's also it's dog whistle language to say, you boys cut that out now. Wink, wink. But there is no plan in place to make these terrorists pay for what they've done. Now, when in London, a member of so-called ISIS took a vehicle and ran on the curb and ran a bunch of people over, they call that a terrorist attack. But the news media here in the States, we have to be careful to not go overboard. Wait a minute, it's the same thing. So if I blow up a building and kill a bunch of people somewhere else, we can call that a terrorist attack. But if I do it here, well, it's just a white supremacist. And most of the media coverage early on was saying a car plowed into a group of protesters. I mean, do you hear how that sounds? A car plowed into a group of protesters, as if no one was operating the car, as if it was some freak accident resulting in the unfortunate injury and death of other people. See, white people are not very good, because they choose not to be good, at holding other white people accountable, which is why white supremacy exists and persists, which is why you have Charlottesville to begin with. I have said it for a long time, and I'll say it again. If white people wanted racism to end, it could end overnight. But white supremacy exists for the same reason the Marine Corps exists, because the American people want it. That's the bottom line. Also, you also have to, let's go back to words for a second, because I talked about how they're linking white supremacy and white supremacists to radical terrorists. But I want you to also understand, we talk about segregation versus integration. People talk about integration as if it is the antidote to segregation, and that somehow integration resolves white terror. And that's not the truth. Segregation only means separation. What America was suffering from was not segregation. America suffered from white terror. White people, white extremists, and terrorists were literally harming, killing, and terrorizing black people. That has nothing to do with segregation. When you go to the grocery store, the produce is segregated from the frozen foods. But there's no war going on. There's no disadvantage there. They're just simply separated based on their section, based on their categories. Now, if someone put the frozen foods in the back of the store where customers were not allowed to go, and as a result, customers were never allowed to purchase the frozen foods, That's not segregation. That's discrimination. And I would argue that that's a form of economic terrorism. Black people were terrorized, and on many levels, not just physically, but economically, academically, and occupationally, which is an extension of economics, or the basis of economics. So when someone is talking segregation, don't allow them to make you think of that being a bad thing because it's terroristic, because it's really not. But what America was practicing was not segregation. It was practicing terrorism against black people. You got to be careful how you allow them to use these words, because white supremacists weaponize everything. The next thing I want to point out is how black people are still focused on going business as usual. Let's have a good time. Let's party. And these terrorists, these extremists, they're organizing. How many of you paid attention to all the different types of flags that they had? Those flags represent something. But see, we don't pay attention, as they hide their organization in plain sight. And we're going along business as usual because we think that everything is just going to be all right. I'm here to tell you it's going to get worse than what you saw in Charlottesville. And here's the reason why. They showed up with assault rifles at the ready. They had all of this military gear on. So they're buying their while we're out going to the club on Saturday nights. They are preparing to go and buy the Army surplus gear. They're out in the woods. They're doing different training tactics. I just got this book, The Invisible Empire, the KKK. And you would be surprised by how many different branches and organizations spread all across this country. This ain't about the South. The United States of America, and you could spell that America with 3 Ks, is all about white supremacy. Some believe in enlisting in the military wing of white supremacy. Some enlist in the political wing of white supremacy. Some enlist in which the paramilitary wing would be the police department. Some are there. Some enlist in the business sector, the banking sector. So just because everybody is not waving a Nazi flag or doing the Hail Hitler salute does not mean that they're not white supremacists. And that's why, again, going back to the word and what they connect that emotionally to through your sensory perception of what you see, what they keep broadcasting on the news, that's what you got to be aware of. At the end of the day, if they are not talking about prosecuting these people who caused the mayhem, they're not serious about doing anything against white supremacy. And I suspect that they are white supremacist sympathizers. In fact, white supremacists themselves. I suspect that they are suspected white supremacists. Because if you're not talking about doing anything, exacting any penalties and punishments, how are you going to deter this? Those are things that you got to think about. Now, what are we going to do? Again, Barack Obama tweeted some nonsense about love, not hate. Just all of this soft kumbaya language. Quoting Nelson Mandela. Michael Eric Dyson, the same thing. We got to come together. I mean, this is why, the reason why some white people, a lot of white people, love Barack Obama now, because he's no threat. The reason why some so-called black leaders get a ton of love and support from a lot of white people is because they're no threat. Your house gets bombed and you show up talking about you forgive and you want to come together and move forward in love and togetherness. Oh, they like you. Because you're not a threat. And I suspect that we will continue, as we always have, in the most non-threatening behavior. We still will not unify with one another. We still won't stop the interracial dating and sexcapades. We'll continue to do what we've always done and looking for someone else to show up and save us. It's not going to happen. And until we get serious about what we're dealing with, it's going to get worse. Anytime you can have 4 and 5 police officers on one person beating the pulp out of this guy, but no police shootings at all. And get this, folks, 3 people died as a result of the activity in Charlottesville. The young lady, Heather, I think her name is Heather Heyer, which I thought it was kind of interesting. The one alleged random person victim who died, her initials would be HH. I'm not so sure that, I mean, it's amazing to me. What are the odds of the one person killed by a race soldier would be a white woman with the initials HH? That's one of the extremists. That's one of their things, HH. And when they don't have a tattoo that says HH, a lot of times they'll have one that says 88. And the 2 8s are significant in that 8 is the H is the 8th letter in the alphabet. And the 88 or 88 stands for Hail Hitler, HH. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy at work here. I'm just saying I just find it very ironic that the one victim is a white woman, HH. So I'll keep an eye on that and see what unfolds from that. And of course, I'll look at the conspiracy theories as they roll in, but I just think that is interesting and noteworthy. But the reality is 3 people died. It was that young lady and 2 Virginia state troopers, if I'm not mistaken. Now, what are the odds of such a huge gathering like that? A terroristic rally, a terror rally, and 3 people are killed, including 2 cops, 2 state troopers. But none of the violence and none of the deaths were caused by cops. If it were Black Lives Matter or black people in general marching with torches, the police would have moved in with their tanks and all their riot gear, and they would have taken the fight to black people. I'm sure a number of black people would have died. It's funny that no cop felt threatened, felt like his life was in jeopardy yesterday. With some of the most violent people this nation has to offer. So these are just things that I felt were noteworthy, angles that I have not heard anyone else cover in the media or the alternative media. And I would say, until we understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything we think we understand will only confuse us. Black people, you better get organized, get your mind out of the sand, come together, unify, and seek to separate from these sick individuals. Until next time, folks, keep your eye to the sky and your ear right here to Critical Thought. And we'll continue to follow this story. All right. Peace.